Alright guys, Kremp here again. I hope you're doing well and enjoying your day so far. The pros are not happy about the way the CDL is approaching the move into the World Championship. The new patch update has been causing massive drama over the last few days. The last couple of months, the pros played on Season 3. They want to play on Season 4 for the World Championship. That is what the current players are actually using. But the CDL wants to do something differently because of various issues in the game. The pros, Envoy, Dashy especially, not at all happy about the way they're approaching this. Just a couple of weeks to go, the pros have no idea what game they're even going to play. Very much enjoyed your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you're new as always. I'd greatly appreciate it. Just wanted to start here. If you guys aren't aware, Amazon and the Esports World Cup are doing a series on the World Cup from last year, and there are some stories that they are looking at. In COD, the story will focus around Drazah, of course, with FaZe, who ended up winning the entire thing, so it should be a great story. Now, I know there was a bit of talk about the way that Variety have editorialized this, whether you think this is fair or not. There was some discussion to say, oh, this is fine, or this is outrageous, or whatever, but, you know, Drazah, raised by his single mum with his 7 brothers and sisters, heads back to his humble origins to explain how a pro gamer emerged from a rickety shit in the North Pole, Alaska, to the biggest stage in esports. So, you know, I think kind of fire, to be fair. I know that maybe there'll be some debate on the whole rickety shed point, but look, it's going to be exciting. I did hear that there was at least interest from the World Cup side who are running this production to go with Drazah to Alaska to like kind of record some of that behind the scenes footage. I wasn't sure if they actually did it or not, but it seems like, yeah, we will presumably get an episode on Drazah and kind of his story, and then of course turning up to the biggest stage in esports, which presumably they mean is the World Cup stage, but you know, you might debate that a little bit. But it's going to be a good watch when this is revealed in the relatively near future. There were a couple of cool clips going around last night. I know that Zinni found this old clip up of when he, you know, I don't really think Zinni ever used Adderall much, but he did decide to pop it before this series, and you guys might know the story about this, that like in scrims he was frying and then he turned up to the actual match and just got completely farmed by Scump. So, you know, as he says, the anxiety at me like a trend of the match and I just froze up, he says. Obviously, you know, it's still a talking point in the CDL every so often to be like, hang on a second, right? Like, are we really just still the drug abuse league? To be fair, it's not exclusive to COD, and they do testing and stuff like this, although there's always been some debate on that. And I always just find it interesting anyway that players will look back at the past and say, yeah, I was on, you know, I was on this, I was on that during this series, during that series. And because the majority of players were for like the majority of time, it's not really a big deal. But you guys, I don't know if you remember when Huke admitted that he was literally on it at the World Championship Final 2020, and the CDL didn't say anything because they're like, well, what are we meant to do about it, right? It's just not a good look. But this is esports, baby. Certainly COD esports is how it's been. And speaking of that kind of era, I know that Zuma was having a bit of a go at his former FaZe teammate. Of course, this team did really well in the Advanced Warfare season. Zuma, Enable, Clayster, Attach. The following year in Black Ops 3, they were good, but they weren't quite good enough compared to OpTic, compared to Splice, compared to Envy, right? Among other teams that were at the top of their game that season. FaZe just were never quite good enough to get a result, and the same thing continued going into Infinite Warfare as well, when they eventually made the decision to get rid of Clay and bring in Gunless in pretty controversial fashion. But Zuma was having a bit of a go at his teammates here, saying, look at the numbers, right? I mean, 1.8 or 1.086 KD from Zuma. Clay had a 1.08, but of course far fewer kills because that was his role. Enable also with pretty damn good numbers, and Attach was down there at a 1.077. So to be fair, the KDs of these guys all actually very similar, right? Like Attach is 24th. I think what he's done here, Zoom, was order it by kills rather than KD or anything on COD Gamepedia. So, you know, that's pretty much what's happening here. So the KDs are a little bit all over the place, but still, I think it's pretty interesting that the FaZe guys all had basically the same numbers, and they were actually pretty good most of the time, but not just good enough when it mattered against some of the top teams. And Clay, of course, is in the replies talking about it as well and saying all at the same level, good but not good enough, right? That was the name of the game that year for them. But let's talk about the World Championship this year, because the drama about this year's champs is not necessarily okay, there is a part who's going to win the tournament. That's, of course, the big one. But let's be real, there are 2 clear favourites, and everybody else has maybe a chance, but it's not wide open, is it? Right, last year going into champs, it felt pretty wide open. OpTic had won an event. New York had just won the event before. FaZe had won an event. Thieves had won an event. Or like Toronto had won an event. It wasn't Thieves at the time, right? Like, you know what I'm saying? Scrappy's team had won an event. Toronto as it was then. This year, of course, it's been Thieves and FaZe winning everything so far, but last year it was all super open because the top 4 teams, Toronto, FaZe, OpTic and New York, they'd all won an event that season, and we went to champs. OpTic were just off a top 12 finish, but, you know, could they turn it around? And of course, that's what they did. But it felt like last year's champs was wide open. This year, it's going to be entertaining, but we're expecting, let's be real, a Thieves FaZe final. But we may not get it, not because those aren't the 2 best teams in the game, because they are, but because the game that they might be playing at the World Championship could very well be rather different to what we have seen them play on over the last couple of weeks. And that's the big drama of last night. But the schedule is now out, and this is what it looks like here. So this is my time zone at GMT. Everything's going to start at 8 p.m. So that is back to the traditional starting spot of a 3 p.m. Eastern start time. Typically, over the last couple of tournaments, we've seen every day of matches starting at 1:30 Eastern, which was typically the case on a day with 5 games, but on a day with 4 games would always start at 3. But the last couple of events, they just decided that every day would start at 1:30 Eastern anyway, which, to be fair, makes a bit of sense. But anyway, because there's only 4 games on any given day at the World Championship, it is going to be a 3 p.m. Eastern start. Thieves Boston, Surge Heretics, FaZe OpTic, and then Toronto Ravens to close out the day. So those are your 4 games. OpTic FaZe, the big one in many respects, that game is coming up third. The following day, of course, is all the winners, the first losers round games and the second winners round games. And then on the final day, you just have the World Championship Grand Final. And then before then, of course, there are plenty of other matches to get to that point. So anyway, that's how things are looking. Actually, yeah, look at that. They do start the 5-match day at 1:30 Eastern. So it's interesting the way that they're throwing around the schedule, but look, it's fine. At the end of the day, we know these matches, that's what's going to be happening. But as I say, the point for many teams is to accept that while there may be 2 clear favourites, everything might not be quite the same, because as Envoy says, 7 days after Major 3, we've got roughly 3 weeks to the World Championship. The CDL accounts are on a 3-month-old patch, roughly, because that's what they've played for the last couple of tournaments. Retail accounts, you and I, are on Season 4, and the CDL is insisting that we will be playing on Season 3.5 for Champs, although there is no way to play on it currently, all because Codcaster has been broken all season. So this is the very interesting development, really. There was talk about, I think it was after Major 3, when Major 4 cycle was beginning, after 1 weekend of qualifier matches, the CDL wanted to put them on the latest patch in Season 4, but Codcaster, it seems, was completely broken. So they had to revert to the old patch which they played. And just to keep in mind, the new patch is substantially different. The Jackal has been nerfed in the new patch. That means the pros have allowed themselves to use an extra couple of attachments. What does that mean for the balance of the ARs and the SMGs? The big one really though is the control spawns, dramatically different on the new patch update, that they'll just be playing for the World Championship right now, or maybe not, because it seems that, of course, we want to be able to watch the World Championship. So if Codcaster is still an absolute mess in the latest patch update, the CDL are like, well, we probably can't use it unless they fix it in the next couple of weeks, which in an ideal world, they would just talk to the devs and say, hey, we've got an urgent problem here. Can you just fix the Codcaster once and for all? And then, Mr. Trail could get back and say, all right, yeah, give me 48 hours. We got it. We're going to sort it out. Of course, that's not how things work here in COD. So instead, they are getting told they're going to play on this patch, the Season 3.5 patch for the World Championship, but it doesn't seem like there's actually a way to use it right now. That's the one the CDL wants to use, but I don't know, seems like just based on what you can download and everything with the game, it's just not possible to use the patch. So I think Benjay summarizes many of the issues here and says that, quality assurance, quality control from the studio, with regard to the competitive functions, to actually make sure that they work, that the Codcaster works, the game modes work, that would be nice. Better chat between the studios, representative chat in the teams, maybe having a competition committee would help. Of course, I talked about that before, but as Envoy says, you know how that process goes. The game is just vastly different, S3.5 to S4 for control. They just just needs to be rules outlined in the handbook for stuff like patch switching, in-game bugs and judgment calls, lagouts, etc. Can't be switching up every year in Major, which I think is totally spot on. And then Dashy's in the reply saying, all season, my bro, that's been broken for years now, talking about Codcaster. So clearly, you know, this frustration is boiling over to others as well. Envoy's the one that's decided to make the tweet about it, but Dashy's in the replies. Others in the replies as well, talking about the predicament that the pros currently find themselves in. So what should the CDL do about this? It seems that they want to play on 3.5, but right now they can't for whatever reason. Season 4 is playable, but it is very different. I mean, it would be strange to play on a patch that is, you know, months old for the World Championship, but also some might argue that, well, it's kind of strange to change it up so dramatically from the final major of the year going into the World Championship. The reality is, these pros just want to start scrimming, and they want to know what they're going to have to practice, because, you know, as we saw with the schedule a second ago, we're basically 3 weeks until the World Championship. If they are going to play on a brand new patch, then there's a lot to learn, a lot to change. Now, of course, Envoy and Scrappy and Thieves, they may well have their preference to probably stay on what they were playing on or something close to it, because that means there's nothing new to relearn and they're the best team as it currently stands. Other teams will probably be more in favour of switching to Season 4 because it changes a couple of things, might give them a new opportunity to get even better. But as BenJ said, fundamentally, of course, that should not be the responsibility of the players. That should be the responsibility, you know, the league should just decide what happens. And, you know, that's why they currently are having a difficult time deciding, primarily because the game's broken. I mean, you know, it all comes back to the same issue, doesn't it? You talk about, you know, we talk about this a lot. Let's say something like snaking, an issue like that. We talk about the issues, you know, with the pros. How should the pros police it? Should this guy stop snaking? Should that guy stop snaking? Should the CDL step in and officially ban more than a couple of pumps? But again, the primary problem comes back to the reality that snaking is a function of the game. Like, it's a thing that you can do in the game, and therefore it causes issues. And I think that's where we are again, is it's like, well, the pros can say one thing, the CDL can say another thing, but if the game is fundamentally broken and an issue, then, you know, everyone once again is working out how we best manage that. So it's an absolute mess, clearly. Don't know how this is going to go over the coming days, but what it certainly does do, it seems anyway, is add a bit of randomness going into the World Championship, because nobody really, you know, can practice right now because they don't know what they're meant to be practicing. So very much interested in your thoughts on all of this stuff in the comment section below. Just one final thing to close up with here with the grid. Snoopy actually got the pick here for great mechanics, average game sense. I know a lot of the replies were saying Shotzzy, but anyway, whoever made this decided that Snoopy was the one to go for instead. Average mechanics, average game sense is pretty interesting. I saw lots of replies here talking about Cammy. I think there are certain players, you know, really, for players like this, just there are some players in the league who are just pretty damn average, right? You look at them in the categories and it's like, yeah, they've pretty much got a 1 and they're pretty solid, but not spectacular in any particular regard. I saw some people talking about 04, and I think, okay, yeah, sure, 04 I'd say probably average mechanics, but I'd say that 04's game sense is a bit about average, right? Like his ability in search and destroy, even awakening, I think is a similar name that was thrown around, but, you know, and probably that's average enough, it's not bad. But, you know, I don't know what you guys think player-wise fits into that box best, but very much interested to your thoughts in the comments. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.
Alright, 2v1. Don't, yo, slow down, bitches. No patience. Just let him plant. They're called sprinting. You guys are sprinting for nothing.